Welcome back, boys and girls, to the Little Pilgrims Progress. I am Pastor Matt, your reader for today. Well, the last time we left off, we were with little Christian and Hopeful, and they had just gone through the Enchanted Ground, almost falling asleep and getting taken away by the enemy. However, they were able to help each other out and keep each other accountable to stay awake enough to make it through the Enchanted Ground. And at the end of that chapter, we learned that Hopeful was assured of his salvation. He knew the king, the prince's, who is the son of the king, loved him. He knew it for sure by the end of that. And they knew then for sure that they would make it to their destination at the Celestial City. So there's 6 chapters left. Let's see what happens in these next 3 chapters, chapters 44 through 47 or 46. And then we will end our last story, with the last 3 chapters. Let's see what happens. Won't you join me?
Chapter 43, The Enchanted Ground. They came a little later in the day to the part of the plain that was called the Enchanted Ground. It was a very pleasant place, so sheltered by the hills that the air was always soft and warm. The streams flowed gently along the breeze, scarcely stirred the leaves of the trees, and everything around seemed quite happy. But the meadows on either side of the way of the king were not fenced in like those in the beautiful Valley of Peace. Therefore, it was not safe for pilgrims to lie down and rest in them. The servants of the wicked prince were often hidden among the rocks and bushes, and when travelers were foolish enough to sleep there, they were almost sure to be robbed, if they were not carried away altogether. "Oh dear, I'm so sleepy. My eyes keep shutting every minute. Do let us sit down and rest for a while." "Not here," said Christian, and he seized Hopeful's arm and shook him gently. Hopeful, you are forgetting. This is the Enchanted Ground." "Well, there's no one to hurt us. I will only stay a few minutes. Christian, don't wait for me." He threw himself down upon the grass, but Christian quickly pulled him up again, and this time he shook him violently. "What are you thinking about? Don't you remember what the shepherd told us?" And he did not rest until Hopeful was thoroughly awakened. Then the little pilgrim was scared at the thought of his danger. What should I have done if I had been alone? I am sure I should have fallen asleep. I have never felt so tired in all my life. I was just beginning to feel sleepy too, but shaking you woke me up. We may be very thankful that we were together. Let us talk about something interesting. That will keep us awake. You have never told me how it was that you began to be a pilgrim." "Well, I started before you did. I knew Faithful very well, and when Evangelist first talked to him, he used to come to me afterward and tell me what he had heard about the king. I did not care much then, but after a time I thought it would be nice to live in the Celestial City. So one day I ran off to the wicket gate and began my journey. But when I came to Vanity Fair, I stopped to play with the boys in the streets, and at last they persuaded me not to go any further, so I stayed there." "You didn't really like it, really? Did you?" "No, at least I liked it sometimes, but I used to often feel scared and unhappy. When pilgrims passed through the town, I was ashamed and afraid that they should see me. Then you came with Faithful, and the minute I saw him, I knew who he was." "Did you see us beaten?" "Yes, and I watched you when you were in the cage. Once I crept close up to the bars. I think you must have been asleep, but Faithful saw me and spoke to me." What did he say?" "He begged me to leave the city at once. He said the king would forgive me for our dear prince's sake. Then I saw all the dreadful sight, and I knew that Faithful had suffered patiently because he loved the king. And I made up my mind that, when you were set free, I would ask you to let me go with you." "Oh, I'm so glad you did. We have been very happy as brothers. Don't you feel glad too?" "Yes, indeed I do. I am sure now that the king loves me, and it will not be very long before we are both safe in his beautiful city." Chapter 44. The Little Pilgrims Wait for Ignorance. All this time, Ignorance had been traveling slowly along by himself. The flatterer and unbelief never took any notice of him. They knew he had not begun his pilgrimage in the right way, and that when he reached the celestial city, the king's servants would not allow him to enter its gates, but would send him back to his own master, the wicked prince. So Ignorance met with no trouble or difficulty, and did not even feel sleepy when he crossed the Enchanted Ground. While Hopeful and Little Christian were passing over that dangerous plain, they remembered Ignorance and wondered how he was getting on. Presently, Hopeful looked back. "He's only a little way behind us. Shall we wait for him?" Perhaps it would be better. Then if he feels sleepy, we can keep him awake." The little pilgrim waited, but although Ignorance saw that they were standing still, he did not seem to care about overtaking them. "Oh, it is a pity for you to stay behind," said Christian, as the lad came slowly toward him. "Won't you walk with us?"
"I don't care. I would just as soon walk by myself. I always have so much to think about."
"What is it that you think of?"
"Oh, the king and the celestial city."
"But thinking about them is not enough. We ought to be very anxious to see the king and his city."
"So I am."
"Then why don't you travel faster?"
"I'm traveling quite fast enough. I am sure that I shall reach the city some day, and why should I not take my journey comfortably?"
But perhaps if you are so careless about it, you will fall into trouble or danger."
"Well, if I do, the king will help me."
"The king will not help you if you do not try to obey him," said Christian, who felt sure that Ignorance did not really know much about the king and his laws.
"I do try to obey him. I have left my home and have become a pilgrim. What else can I do?"
"You did not pass by the cross, and I am afraid that if you have not a roll and a pilgrim's dress, the king's servant will not let you enter the city."
"Oh, I am sure you are quite wrong in what you say. I have read that the prince will give a white robe to every pilgrim, and no doubt he will send me mine soon. Why should I travel to the wicket gate and the cross to look for it? It would seem as if I did not believe what the prince had said."
Then Christian remembered the paper that Evangelist had given to him before he had left home. Perhaps Ignorance had one like it.
"Did the king send you a message?" "A message? No, of course he did not. I should never expect a great king to send a message to a boy like me."
Poor little Christian felt quite puzzled. "I don't know what to say to him," he whispered to Hopeful. "I am sure he is wrong, but he will not believe us." But Ignorance was now tired of talking.
"I really can't keep up with you. You must go on by yourselves."
And as the little pilgrim did not know what else they could say to him, they went on and left him to follow as slowly as he wished.
Chapter 45, The Land of Delight.
The little pilgrims, having passed over the Enchanted Ground, found themselves in the Land of Delight. It was the most beautiful country they had ever seen. Its mountains were covered with trees, and its valleys were green with soft grass and happy with the loveliest flowers. In the distance shone the glorious light that the shepherds had shown them from the delectable mountains. And as the children's eyes grew accustomed to its brightness, they were able to distinguish the walls and gates of the celestial city. The wicked prince and his soldiers never came into the Land of Delight. The people who lived there were all true servants of the king, and they received Christian and Hopeful very kindly.
"Your troubles are now over. You have only to stay here and be happy until the king sends for you."
"Will he send for us soon?"
"We cannot tell you that. Sometimes the pilgrims live quietly in this land for many years, and sometimes the king gives them work to do for him in the country of the wicked prince. But at last they all go to the celestial city to dwell forever in his presence."
"I remember. When Help drew me out of the slough, he said that he had been to the gates of the city, but the king had given him some work that he would have to do before he entered it." And while he wandered up and down the mountains and along the beautiful valleys with Hopeful, little Christian began to wonder whether his mother was living in this Land of Delight, or whether she had gone into the city. He looked anxiously at the people whom he met, but he did not see anyone whose face was like his mother's picture. The king must have sent for her. Oh, will it not be nice to see her again? Perhaps she has heard that we are here, and she may be watching for us even now." The little pilgrims spent many happy days in the land of delight, and one morning they came to a valley that was laid out in vineyards and large gardens. The gates were all wide open, and as the boys stopped to look at the trees and flowers, one of the gardeners spoke to them. "You need not stay outside. These are the king's gardens, and they are for the pilgrims to walk in." Then he took their hands and led them about among the vines and flowers, and in the evening he showed them a quiet little arbor where they could take a rest and sleep safely for the night. "Oh," said Christian, as they sat watching the sun as brothers, which was slowly sinking behind the hills. "Don't you feel glad that we came? I seem to be forgetting all the troubles we have had now that we are so happy." "I am thankful that I ran away from Vanity Fair," said Hopeful. "And it was such a good thing that I did not lose my role there. I don't know how it was that I managed to keep it safely. And now we have only to wait for the king's message. I would go away and work if he wished it, but I think I would like best to go straight into the city." "So would I, brother." And then they lay down as they had done in the Valley of Peace and slept quietly until the morning. Chapter 46, The Dark River. The land of delight was so very near to the celestial city that the Shining Ones often came down to visit the people who lived there. Their faces shone with a beautiful light, as the face of Christian's mother had done when he saw her in his dreams, and their garments were all white and glistening. Very often they brought messages from the king to his servants, and the little pilgrims knew that someday a message would be given to them. I told you that they slept one night in the king's garden, and the next morning when they were walking slowly among the vines, they saw two of the Shining Ones coming down the path to meet them.
"You are traveling to the celestial city?"
"Yes." Then the Shining Ones asked many questions and desired both Christian and Hopeful to tell them of all that had happened since they began their pilgrimage. Christian told of all his difficulties and dangers, and Hopeful told how he had wasted his time in Vanity Fair. "We have often behaved badly, but we are really sorry, and we do love the king with all of our hearts."
"He knows that you do, and he has forgiven you for all of your mistakes and disobedience for the sake of his dear son. He has sent us now to tell you that he wishes you to enter into his city."
When Hopeful heard this, his heart was full of joy. Little Christian was glad also, but when he thought of going into the presence of the king, he began to feel timid. He said to the Shining Ones, "Will you go with us?"
"We will go a little way with you, and we will meet you again at the gate of the city."
"Oh, how are we to cross over?"
"You'll have to walk through the water, but you must not be afraid. The city is on the other side, and you will very soon be safe within its gates."
Hopeful raised his head and looked across. There's a bug. Hopeful raised his head and looked across the river, and on the opposite shore he could see that the pathway winding up the hillside toward the glorious golden gates.
"Oh, Christian, we need not be frightened now. We are so very near to the city."
The little Christian's eyes had grown dim with fear, and he could not see the light beyond the river. He shivered as he looked at the water, and then he turned once more to the Shining Ones.
It is deep. We shall drown if we try to cross it." "No, you will not find it too deep. You must not look at the water. You must lift up your eyes to the light, and the king will help you."
"Will you come with us?" asked Christian again, and Hopeful wondered why he looked so pale and scared.
"We cannot come with you, but we shall meet you on the other side and lead you into the presence of the king."
"Did my mother cross it safely?"
"Yes, and she is waiting for you and longing to see you. Do not be afraid. Trust in the king, and remember all that he has done for you."
Then the shiny ones turned away, and Hopeful put his arm around his little companion's shoulders.
Come, Christian, this is our very last trouble, and it will soon be over.
Let us go together, and I am sure the king will take care of us. So the little pilgrims went slowly down the bank and stepped into the water.
Well, that's it for this week, boys and girls. Thank you for joining us. Wow, they're almost there. What an adventure Little Christian and Hopeful have gone through. They've gone through many challenges, been through many hardships, but they are nearing the end of their journey and are almost to the celestial city. Let's see what happens next week when ignorance tries to cross the river, and what happens when the boys get to the gates of the celestial city. Will they enter it? Will their journey be over? Or will they be rejected? Let's find out. Will you join me next week? Have a great week. Blessings to you. Don't forget to read the information at the end of the video. Talk about it with your parents. Pray, read, go to the Bible. Jesus loves you. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Y'all ready for this?